Cool, perfect. 3, 2, 1, go. Hello world, this is Bytes of Intelligence, a podcast where we explore trailblazers shaping our world, one meaningful conversation at a time. Today I have the absolute privilege and honor to welcome Professor David Malan. Is that the correct way of pronouncing it?
It is, yes.
So Professor David Malan is someone who has inspired millions of people, including myself, around the world to fall in love with the art of computer science. Professor Malan is a world-renowned educator and computer science magician, as I like to call him, best known as a creator of Harvard's iconic CS50 online course, which has become the largest course at Harvard and one of the most popular online courses ever taught, reaching over, last time I checked, 6.3 million learners across the world. Through his engaging lectures, creative live demos, humor, and heart, he's redefined how computer science is taught, turning what once seemed quite intimidating into something deeply accessible and quite exciting. For me and so many others, Professor Malan represents the idea that one passionate teacher is all it really takes to genuinely be excited about a field. And on a personal note, I actually started, I did your course, I think probably around 6-7 years ago, and I think that's what sparked my journey into computer science, and I'm sitting here today studying computer science at Imperial College, so thank you so much. But yes, Professor Malan, thank you so much for being here. It's truly an honor to have you on Bytes of Intelligence.
That is maybe the most kind opening someone could make. Thank you for the kind words.
So yeah, I thought I'd start this conversation by just touching a little bit on your childhood, if that's okay.
Sure.
Would you be able to share like a vivid kind of journey, a short journey about where you started as a child, what your interests were, your dreams, and then what led you to Harvard, if that's okay?
Yeah, I'm not sure I had some dream or vision for myself academically or even professionally growing up. I think I was just kind of going through the motions of school, and I was fortunate to do well in various subjects, but at least in the schools I went to, it was all fairly formulaic. Like every year you took English on some particular focus and some math class and some science class, and there really wasn't much room for exploration. And so it wasn't until college, in my sophomore year, so my second year of college, that I actually finally made time or had time to explore something beyond the usual cookie cutter type program. And for me, that was to take a computer science course called literally CS50, the class that I now teach. And for me, just sort of the lights went off in a good way, where I found that homework was finally fun. Like after 19 some years of going to school and enjoying certain subjects and certain classes, like the homework was generally fun. And at the time, problem sets or homework assignments in this case were released, I think, on Friday afternoons after the third lecture of the week. And I remember looking forward to going home to my dorm room to work on like 7 p.m. to open up the problem set and start working on it during the night. And so that just felt like a sign for me. And I will say it was later, it was senior year of college, that I finally started taking other electives. One of my favorite classes in the end was Latin A. It was me and a bunch of first years who were doing their language requirement, but I was finally just doing a class for fun. I took Dramatic Arts 101, which is a survey class on theater, which was so much fun. And then even in graduate school, my PhD was in computer science, but I dabbled in auditing some other classes, among them Anthropology 1010, which is an introduction to archaeology.
Oh my gosh.
And I even had this mid-grad school crisis of thinking like, oh, I wonder if I should have majored in archaeology instead, but I stayed with CS. And for me, that was the takeaway. It was finally emerging from a system of schools that were all good, but were fairly rigid in their structure. And so it was only once I finally had electives that I finally got to find my way.
No, that's really inspiring. And do you think that computer science is that one field which kind of lets you apply it to so many different fields? So that's kind of where you got that kind of interest of, you said archaeology, and I think you studied government initially.
Before CS,
So yeah, do you think computer science is that one field where you can actually get that breadth?
In general, yes. And I think that's what resonates with a lot of our students today, is that they don't have to go through computer science and become a computer scientist. They can take, even after just one course like CS50, some of the concepts and some of the practical skills back to the arts, humanities, social sciences, physical sciences, and actually like do useful work using CS principles. I think that's fairly empowering for folks.
No, that really makes sense. And just quickly touching on that initial journey. So obviously you entered college, as they say in the US, studying government. I think that was your major. What was there like a wow moment, or how come you just decided to go to a CS50 class, and what made you switch your kind of passion, I guess, towards that field?
Yeah, I mean, I leaned toward government, and I didn't technically declare it maybe my first year spring.
Okay.
which was a little earlier than a lot of students, but I rarely gravitated toward things with which I was already familiar. Like my favorite class in high school was probably constitutional law, US constitutional law, and it was in part because of the teacher. He was just amazing.
Right.
The subject matter I really liked. The structure of the class was wonderful, and that every week we would discuss a case that had been before the actual Supreme Court in the United States, and then we would write our own position papers, either for or against.
Right, okay.
And it was just such fun and so different from everything else. And so the closest match to that in college seemed to be indeed government. And so I did that for like a year and a half plus, and I did it so quickly in terms of focusing entirely on the requirements and getting all of the prerequisite courses out of the way that I got pretty darn far through the major, and probably would have been less work to finish Gov than to start CS, but I'm glad I made the switch.
We're glad too.
Yeah, but it was there too because I was just staying within my comfort zone.
Right, okay.
And CS50, I finally shopped, as we used to say, just sort of sat in on it before even registering, and I probably followed some friends there, and I definitely leaned toward being, I mean, I was a geeky kid, certainly, and I liked playing computer games, and I liked dabbling with computers, but I had never taken a formal course. I think the closest I ever got was like a summer camp where for 1 week we used an old language called Logo, where you can move like a turtle up, down, and left and right. Wow. And I think I made tic-tac-toe. And I do also remember someone in my life must have given me a programming book on a language called Basic. And I want to say, though I might just be rewriting history, that the font of the code in the book was not a monospaced font, which made it really hard for my untaught eyes to discern like where spaces need to be. Or I was just an idiot and I didn't know how to transcribe answers to problems that were literally in the book. But I remember being very frustrated by it. And so I never really took more of an interest than that until finally in university, sophomore year, took CS50, and wow, like my God, like homework was genuinely fun.
No, that's really inspiring. And just touching on the education systems there, obviously the UK education system kind of not forces you, but guides you into choosing one path and kind of sticking with it for your 3-4 years for your undergraduate. Do you think that if you'd studied maybe perhaps in a UK university, would the course of your life been very different? Would you have perhaps chosen computer science initially, or would you have kind of stuck the path in history or politics?
No, I assume I would have focused on political science or some equivalent.
Wow, okay.
And I've never liked the sound of that system, to be honest, here, because at least if primary and secondary school education in the UK is akin to in the US, where you do follow a fairly common formula, it just escapes me as to where like British students would ever find their path in advance unless it's one of those well-trodden ones. I mean, I feel like the real solution here wouldn't even be to wait to university before you sort of decide what to specialize in, but give that broad exposure earlier on.
Right.
And I do think some schools, especially more resourced schools, are in better positions to expose their students to all the more offerings because they have more equipment and more teachers and whatnot. So that's a luxury, certainly, but that seems far preferable to sort of guessing what you want to do or be in life and then commit to it for 3 or 4 years of university.
No, definitely, that makes sense. So just pivoting the conversation slightly to CS50, which is, I think, what you're most known for. If you just had to pitch CS50 to someone, perhaps someone who hasn't heard of it, what would you say CS50's aim was?
To make computing accessible to folks who are not computer people, but to also have a rigor to it so that the returns of the class, so to speak, are particularly, if not unusually high for an introductory course. Okay,
got it. No, that really makes sense. And I think just to touch on your live demos, so when I was watching CS50 a few years ago, I just remember your live demos being legendary. Like that really gripped me and excited me. I was just wondering if you had one of the most daring moments in your classroom, if you could describe that, and also kind of what inspires you to create these live demos, because they're quite creative.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know if I'd call them demos. At the end of the day, they're still computer science demonstrations. And most of them are inspired by or borrowed from other not even colleagues now, but former professors who did something similar. The phone book, it might have come from my mentor. I don't remember, though I think he claims credit for it. On occasion, we have done the peanut butter and jelly example, for which there's actually a video that went viral a few years ago. And like, we've been doing this for years. But I took that one from my 5th grade homeroom teacher, who used it as an exercise to teach little kids like how to and not to follow directions. And for those unfamiliar, you essentially have people write down a program, an algorithm for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich step by step, which is a very popular American thing. And invariably, kids make assumptions, they skip steps, they don't tell you to open the bread or the jar, and things go off the rails, and so we make fun of that. And so we've done that kind of demo, which is fun, if a little wasteful, though we try to serve the sandwiches afterwards nowadays. The phone book is definitely, I think, what CS50 is most known for and the most canonical. Yes, and I mean, fun fact, just this past month when we were filming the latest version of CS50 for the undergraduates, which will become CS50X 2026 in a few months, the phone book wouldn't tear in half because like phone books are actually getting really hard to find in the real world. And they're also getting smaller, which makes them much less dramatic. So we've started making our own. Like we took a really big hardware catalog from a local company and we just put an actual phone book cover on it, but the pages are for like hardware supplies. And the damn thing wouldn't tear in half because the spine is much stronger. So that was slightly embarrassing, but also made for a nice, memorable moment, which is the whole point of these exercises.
No, definitely. And even I think you were touching on the peanut butter and jelly one. That's kind of similar to the one which I think I read an article about when you were studying CS50. Professor, I think Brian Kernighan was your professor. And I think he did something where the beard trimmer example.
He did.
Is that kind of similar to that? Like
beard.
Describing, would you mind just explaining that?
Please? I mean, he too, this was the very first lecture of CS50, and he was a gray-haired, long-beard kind of computer scientist who was moonlighting as a professor that semester, and now he's full-time faculty at Princeton. But he was filling in that year at CS50 and happened to be the year that I took it at the college. And as one of his demonstrations, he too was trying to send the message of how important precision is when writing algorithms and being ever so precise with your instructions. And so the algorithm he wanted to act out was how to cut one's beard. And he brought out, very imprecisely, a whole set of cutting instruments from like a small scissors to like a hedge clippers, although it sort of grew in infamy over the years. And I swear, the equipment I remember him using was much larger and scarier and more dangerous than he actually did. And he just sniffed up a tiny bit of his beard, whereas I and all of my classmates remember that he trimmed his whole beard off, and it sort of the legend grew. But we actually found that footage recently. It was on an old VHS tape.
Wow, okay.
And so it's actually
what year
on
was this in?
YouTube. This was 1996 in September.
Okay.
But his point, too, was to, one, emphasize a concept, precision, and algorithms, but also to create, I presume, a memorable moment.
Definitely. The fact that we're talking about it.
I mean, the case in point, like some 20, 30 years later.
And just touching on that, so you once sat in Professor Kernighan's class studying CS50. Could you take us back to that room, describe how it felt to be a student there, and then describe perhaps some impact that Professor Kernighan might have had to you now that you're the professor leading CS50?
Yeah, I mean, he was so sweet and so smart and so immersed in the industry too that he ticked all of the boxes in terms of engaging and interesting students. He was so accessible. I still remember getting up the nerve to go to his office hours once, but so kind and welcoming. And so that certainly helped. He did certainly the opposite of turn anyone away from the field, as arcane as it might still have felt to students. There was a lot of energy, I remember, in the room. He had adopted a convention, which I think some of his predecessors had, of having a TA walk around the room, giving little mini chocolates or candies to anyone who was brave enough to ask a question. And I swear to God, mid-semester, I'm pretty sure I finally not only got up the nerve to ask a question, but was hungry enough to ask a question. And I indeed got my piece of candy. And we don't maintain that tradition nowadays, but that too, I think, spoke to the sort of feel in the class.
No, got it. And I think it's just what you said at the start, that it's unbelievable how much an impact a teacher can have on the love for the subject. I was just wondering how that kind of impacts when you want to plan CS50. How do you think about the impact that you're going to have on literally millions of students?
I think that would kind of psych me out. So
okay,
try not to think about that too much and just do what we think is best in the moment.
No, that makes sense. But I think you're definitely, even if you don't think about it actively, you're definitely doing that, because I just remember that feeling when I was studying CS50, that you're watching the lectures and you're like, wow, this is really interesting. I didn't connect these two dots together. And then going and doing the assignment and getting that wow factor yourself. I think that's something which CS50 really gave me. And I think even at university, that's a similar thing which I've kind of carried through, that you have all these lectures, but then applying it to the courseworks and assignments. That's kind of the wow moment for me.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to hear that. And it's right that I've stayed in touch with him too all these years later. After having taken the helm of CS50, I reached out to him years ago. He came some years back and gave a guest lecture in CS50.
Amazing.
And even just the other day, I emailed him because there was some thread on Reddit about people discussing or debating the etymology of the command BC, which is a math calculator that's built into a lot of Unix and now Linux systems. And according to Wikipedia and folks' Google search results, like there wasn't a definitive answer as to like why is it called BC.
Right.
I'm like, you know who would know this? Like Brian Kernighan. And so I dropped him a note.
And for context, he's the one who actually wrote
He wrote a lot of the original Unix commands, like the awk command and a few others as well. And interestingly, there was no formal confirmation via him of where it came from. Some of that information does seem to have been lost to the ages. But there too, he's sort of my go-to resource for escalating questions to which I don't know the answer.
No, that's incredible. I just had a question about your daily routine as a Harvard professor. So what does that kind of look like? Are you teaching quite often? Are you researching, or how does it kind of work?
It totally depends. Like now we're in the midst of the fall semester
Right.
at Harvard, and so like each week is much busier, it feels, than the rest of the year because there's something very cyclically, and in our case, almost every Monday, where we have a full afternoon of lecture, which nowadays are about 3 hours long, and then we're getting ready for the week's homework assignment or problem sets as we call them, and making sure the TFs or teaching fellows have everything they need. In parallel, we're often focused on working on the software side of things. So some students might know we have this virtual duck built on top of OpenAI's APIs nowadays to create a virtual TA or teaching assistant for students.
Wow, okay.
So that's constantly evolving as well as all of the other tools that we use in CS50's ecosystem. Depending on the time of year, we're sometimes presenting at conferences or running CS50 puzzle days, as we are right now in London with our friends from Meta and alumni here. So it really depends on the time of year, but I would say fall is very heads down focused on campus goings on, with the exception of this trip here. And in the spring and summer, it's often project based and preparatory work for the next fall.
Got it.
And
Okay.
for a lot of the outward facing work that we do with communities and nonprofits and universities elsewhere.
Right. No, I think that's really interesting. And the last thing I just want to touch on, that CS50 has probably made computer science so accessible to people all around the world, because people, all you need is an internet connection, and even someone in Africa or South America or wherever they are in the world, they can access CS50.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably one of the biggest powers of, would you say, like, of the internet? That's like one of the biggest benefits.
Yeah, no, and we're really seeing these long-term impacts now. I mean, I've been teaching CS50 for 19 years, and so not only could someone have been 0 when I started teaching, so that's a little frightening. So and now we're in university studying computer science, but even folks who took the class online or even on campus when they too were in school, I mean, they might be in their 30s or 40s nowadays, and so they're well into their careers, and so it's actually really neat to hear about some of our alumni working here at Meta and other such companies.
And have you had like one of these, have you heard of any inspiring stories of someone who probably wasn't even considering computer science and having taken CS50? Do you normally get to hear of these stories? Or?
Sometimes when people reach out and share. I mean, there was a really sweet story that one of our online students shared about, he was a professional chef and a very good chef at that, but apparently his heart really wasn't in it to the extent that he might have wanted it to be, and he was really interested in steering in the direction of tech, and so he found his way to CS50X, the online version of CS50, and that helped him begin to pivot into a completely different career. And so we definitely hear lots of stories of those, including at this event tonight. A lot of the students we're meeting in person for the first time who have been somehow redirected in a good way by having found resources like ours and found their passion.
No, that's really incredible. I think, that's genuinely the power of computer science, because otherwise it feels as though to become an expert or even to begin to become an expert in a field, you have to go to university or do a master's or some qualification.
Yeah.
But I feel as though with the power of YouTube and CS50X, edX, you're kind of bringing that to someone's house so they can even try it before they even decide to go on that journey.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I mean, if they already are fortunate to have like the computer or the phone and the requisite internet access, like the rest they can take from there.
Right. The next question I wanted to talk about was, back when you were a student, I think you built Shuttleboy.
Yes, you've done your homework.
Yeah, no, I just saw that. But do you mind just touching on what Shuttleboy was for someone who doesn't know? And I had another follow-up question, which was, even now as a professor, I'm sure that your timetable must be extremely busy, but do you ever get time to build small side projects, or is it quite hard now that every minute is busy?
Kind of quite hard. Almost anything I do when it comes to writing code somehow serves CS50 and its mission, which is still fun. But what's nice about those projects and indeed the very first Shuttleboy is that it serves an audience and it solves a problem. And that's really how Shuttleboy became a thing. So in the fall of 1996, I had taken CS50. In the spring of 1997, I took a course called CS51, which was a course in functional programming and object-oriented programming, a class that most kids would take after CS50. And that was kind of it in terms of my formal software instruction. Like almost any other programming language that I've ever used or known since, it's been self-taught by Googling and asking friends and sort of figuring things out. Which, as an aside, I actually think is very empowering in general, because I do think too many students have a mindset that I need to learn C, I need to take a course in Java, I need to take a course. Like, no, like you should take...
You learn the idea of how to think like a programmer.
You should learn like how to think, certainly, and to take a few representative courses about different paradigms of programming, like procedural programming or imperative programming, declarative programming, object-oriented programming, functional programming, and some of those are taught in the same courses, so this isn't a big laundry list of prerequisites. But in any case, after just learning a bit of C and C++, I set out to write a program whose name became Shuttleboy, and it was a Linux-based program, or Unix at the time, via which students could telnet at the time before SSH to a local mainframe on campus and log in with their Harvard username and password, and then type Shuttleboy, or SB for short, and they would see a menu of options that would quite quickly let them find the schedule for the next shuttle bus between point A and B, where A and B were like a dorm and some classroom on campus or vice versa.
All right.
So this was an innovation at the time, because the alternative was like a big sheet of paper that you would have to carry around. And it just felt like it was a problem ripe for disruption, so to speak. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had never written a graphical Unix program. And it was graphical in the sense that it used a library called ncurses, which just lets you create menus up, down, left, right, and highlight things on the screen. But you have sort of full control over the 80 columns and 24 rows of text, as opposed to everything being paginated via like printf.
Got it.
And the namesake for the program was because at the time, back in my day, the way you found out what was for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the dining hall was you would call Menu Man, which was this automated phone system. So you'd call a local phone number on campus and punch 1 for breakfast, 2 for lunch, 3 for dinner, or whatever. And then a pre-recorded human voice, so some man every morning was recording these messages for the kids on campus, would tell you the day's menu. And so Shuttleboy was meant to be a diminutive, sort of lightweight version of that kind of technology, just running out of my own Unix account for students to use.
No, that's literally really incredible, because I feel that the power of computer science is in these side projects sometimes, which you just solve a small problem, and which ends up
people started using. I mean, it went like viral in the campus sense. So several hundred, maybe thousands of students were using it, because there was no alternative.
And it solves a real problem, like a practical problem. Like, how do I get my shuttle bus timetable?
No, and it was super fun to sort of work on that. And I would go back to my dorm and neglect my homework because I wanted to fix some bug or add some feature to this. And so it just kept evolving over time. And funny enough, you're bringing back memories of alternatives to this, where we had Shuttleboy cards, because one of our teaching fellows, or TFs, was very artistically inclined, and it was sort of a CSE problem into itself to figure out, all right, if you want to give every student on campus a little plastic credit card sized thing, how can we fit the entire shuttle schedule efficiently on it?
One thing.
And coming up with a very minimalist representation of it all. And that too was a challenge. So we started handing out physical cards, which ironically was more efficient to use than like take out, not even your laptop, like take out the desktop computer or go to the computer lab, log into the system, username and password, type SB, enter. Like once you got to the prompt, it was super fast. There's just a lot of friction, but take it out of your wallet was ironically less work. So for several years, we went in that direction. And then when AOL Instant Messenger was still a thing, we had a Shuttleboy bot, which was, I don't remember what language it was written in, Perl or PHP maybe, but it was a like a Slack plugin nowadays, but it was a bot over AOL Instant Messenger where you could just say, hey, how do I go from point A to B? And it would just tell you.
Oh my God. Wow, it's like you're foreshadowing what's now we have, like Google Maps and all these different sort of AI agents that you can just kind of ask, how do I get to Meta?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. It was the precursor to that. I mean, yes, and even Shuttleboy ran in a Unix system where before there was there was direct messaging, but no one called it that by name. But we had friends lists where you run like a friends command, and this would just pull all of your friends' usernames from a text file, and then it would do. It would run a command to figure out if they were online, and you would see updating every second or every 5 seconds a list of your friends online, and then you could message them. So I mean, all of the things we take for granted now had very early black and white incarnations thereof back in the day.
That's so cool, just hearing it actually evolve over literally probably 20, 30 years and seeing how it, right now it just feels like it's at the tip of our fingers. You know, you said you're pulling out that physical card, now you pull out your phone, you don't even don't even think twice.
Well, and ironically, so Shuttleboy was decommissioned some years ago. I don't remember when.
Oh, so it's carried on quite a lot since after you.
I think I maintained it because I was still around and I
Sure.
still had my account, and then I came back for graduate school. I don't remember what year we finally killed it off. The bot version lived on for some time, and then we turned it into a website eventually, which was somewhat useful too. I don't know if we ever got around to making a mobile version, so it might have been around the time, ironically, that smartphones came around. They were like, all right, now
it's time to move
you
on.
can take it from there. But it lived on for quite some time, and it was a fun project to keep diving in and out of.
No, that's really incredible. And I just want to now pivot slightly more to AI as the buzzword is. Everyone's talking about it. But as artificial intelligence continues to evolve, the first question I just had was, what were your thoughts on the role of humans? Because what I've found is right now, even in the last year or two, even being a university student or looking at my cousins, how they're like around 10 or 11 years old in school, they're using ChatGPT for even like menial tasks such as writing an email or WhatsApp message. And I'm just worried or kind of curious as to what you think about the role of humans. Do you think we're over-reliant on AI?
Sounds like your cousins are.
They are definitely.
Some people, yes. And
Right.
I think, I've seen even articles or anonymous Reddit posts online. One comes to mind where a student was bemoaning the fact that he feels he had just gone through like 3 years of computer science and he doesn't really know what he's doing because he over-relied on it since ChatGPT's inception in 2022.
Right.
I mean, that's unfortunate. And I also think at a younger age too, it's probably irresponsible for students to use, or even teachers or schools to encourage overuse of these technologies. Because for me, the exciting thing about AI is that it can automate the boring stuff, which I think is the name of a famous book too in tech. It should really eliminate the tedium. It should amplify your impact as a human. But it maybe I'm just old, but it boggles my mind that you would have AI write a WhatsApp message for you, which doesn't seem like a solution to an actual problem.
But just touching on that, so you think the ideal case or the optimistic case of AI is letting humans focus on more creative things and kind of come up with ideas to solve the big problems of our world, and let AI kind of focus on iterating and getting it done fast? Is that, or have I kind of...
I don't know. I think that's overstating it. I mean, I do think we will have over time better and better AI, that AI will hopefully be solving big problems too. Right. I'd like to think that it will still be humans directing what the software does, but it seems like no good will come from over-relying on technology like this at an early edge, because you're just doing yourself a disservice. Like you're supposed to be putting in that time learning and getting as much out of that academic experience as you can, and you're just shortchanging yourself, which means you're going to emerge a less educated, less capable person, presumably if the computer is doing more of this lift for you. Or the
actual hardwire of the brain.
Right? Yeah, and so that's why even in CS50, for instance, we have our own virtual duck built on top of these OpenAI APIs that's really meant to be a less helpful version of ChatGPT. And the funny thing is, in class 2 days ago when we were filming it in Cambridge, something was going wrong in a program, and it was a program we'd used last year, and so it was strange to me because I would assume that we would have found any bugs in these programs in years past, but no. And so it was a smaller group too because it was an off day in terms of the schedule, and so I asked our own duck, and the darn thing was not helpful. I really just wanted in the moment like the answer to the question, but ironically it was behaving exactly as it's supposed to, because if a student were struggling with the same thing, we don't want to just spoil it for them. We want them to take some time, go through the muscle memory. I had all these students' eyes bearing down on me though, like we've got a schedule to keep to, and so for me, in that moment, it was the wrong tool for the job, but that's exactly, I think, what these technologies should be doing. Like a good teacher would be like, go back to your chair and wrestle with this a little longer, rather than just give you the answer.
No, definitely. I think even just before this podcast, I was tutoring someone for A-level further maths, and I think when I tutor, it's that finding that right balance of there's no point just giving the student the answer, because the question you get through more questions, but I think that struggle, that small 2-3 hours where you're struggling, I think that's where the greatest learning is. And it's similar to even physical health. I think, when you go to the gym, and I think they say that the most gains you get in your muscle is when you're on that last 2 reps of that set.
Yeah.
When you're struggling, but you're nearly there and you're pushing and you get to the end. So I think that's quite similar to learning as well.
It seems likely to me that that's the case, and having the neural connections actually form as a result of that process.
And I just had a question on, what do you think is the next big wave of AI, for example? So there's many different fields such as medtech where it's being used, or geography, education. Do you have any inklings or any inclinations as to where do you think AI will be most useful in the next few years?
I mean, the only one I think about personally quite a bit is in the educational context, and it is already game-changing for so many of our students on campus, yes, but ever more so online, off campus, who have never had access to like the resources of a school like Harvard, where you don't necessarily have a TA, a teaching assistant dedicated to you. You don't necessarily have a whole bunch of classmates who are studying the same thing as you. You might be a kid in their room at home with parents who are not computer scientists, and you have no one to answer your questions. And so already I think it's been game-changing in terms of helping to uplift all the more folks who would struggle on their own and maybe even get turned off to the field because they're just hitting a wall. So I think that is game-changing. No one, I think, really knows. And they're all guesses for other fields, but at least that one, I feel it's enough within my wheelhouse where I can see, like, okay, this is an actual solution to a current problem. And I dare say it's only going to get better for that use case, especially over time.
That really makes sense. Yeah.
In the real world, I would be happy if my stupid smart speakers at home would just understand my instructions correctly when I ask to play some song or turn on some lights, because that technology itself is ripe for further disruption.
Got it. And just, I know we're coming to the end of the podcast, but I had a couple of questions about some advice you would give to potential students listening to this. So let's say you had a student who came up to you and said, I really respect what you're doing, but coding's just not for me. Computer science coding, not my thing. Would you be able to say anything to them? Obviously, we don't want to like change their interest as such, but just how would you encourage them to give it a go if you are speaking to them?
I mean, it depends on how far along they already were, because if they had tried it and they just
let's say they haven't tried it, they just think it's not for me. It's like same as for example for me, I haven't gone into medicine or biology. I just think it's not for me, but I haven't even tried it, so I don't know. It could be for me, but there's that like a roadblock.
I mean, I think that's fine. I'm not particularly inclined to convince someone to study something that they don't have an intrinsic interest in. When I was a sophomore, had a curiosity about computer science. My friends were in that circle, and so I was curious. And I think that probably helped motivate me because it came from me, and it wasn't my parents telling me to do this or even friends pressuring me into do it. So I think that if a student had came forward to me and maybe they had a bad experience, whether that's a lack of support structure or maybe a bad class that they just didn't work for them, I might encourage them, well, why don't you try this other route or go sit in on so-and-so's class or give it one more try. But I don't think I would try to convince them because there's an infinite number of other things that they could find and take an interest in. And I think that interest should come from breadth, yes, but also just something intrinsic inside them.
And do you know that curiosity point you touched on? What makes you curious about computer science yourself? Because there might be some people who don't, so they haven't found that curiosity point. So if you had to like kind of inspire someone to see for you what makes you take every day about computer science?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, it was like video games, but it was more than that. I mean, I was like the first kid, or the only kid I knew in 7th grade, maybe a little younger, who was like typing out his essays and not handwriting them, and also because our parents had one, printing them out on a laser printer.
Nice.
And so I was just like, I was fortunate to have access to some of this hardware to play with at an early age, but I don't know, like some things, it just clicked with me. I really liked playing with it. And this wasn't true of my sibling, for instance, who just didn't gravitate toward that same kind of technology, but it felt for me like just kind of a comfortable space. And this was the beginning, just before the internet, when you were able to like dial up to local bulletin board systems. There was just something really neat to me about that. And if I overanalyze it years later, there's something really interesting, as you alluded to, I do think, in computer science, where if you're fortunate enough to already have, a phone, or better yet, a laptop or a desktop, like that's all you need. And up until then, you're presumably only using what software some company or someone else has given you or put on that computer, or that you downloaded from some website or app store. But like you can start creating that stuff yourself. And I think that's very empowering, that you can finally do all the more with this thing that you never even realized you could all this time.
Right. No, that's really interesting. It's as if you can create power yourself through something. Someone has provided you this laptop, but now you can, with this laptop, create new power, new technologies, solve new problems. And
I think about this a lot too, because with a lot of the colleagues I work with at Harvard who are very expert in videography and the video editing and production that we do, there's so much hardware involved and so many people involved, and yet I can't help but feel grateful and sort of amazed that I can do my little job just on like this laptop. And I just plug it in and now I can project it on this massive screen, and it's just very...
Send it to devices all across the world.
It's just very empowering what you can do with a laptop. So if you can get over that threshold and have access to that initial resource, that's really all you need to get things off the ground.
Definitely. And one of the last few questions I had was, have you ever experienced failure in life? Because
Sure.
just in the sense that, especially at institutions like Imperial, Harvard, MIT, all these top institutions around the world, the imposter syndrome, which I personally did face in my first year, even to this day probably, it's quite hard when you always want to achieve the best and then you're scared of even failing a single test or a single coursework. I was wondering if you've ever faced it and how you kind of recovered from that, and what advice you'd give to a student who's kind of grappling with that right now.
Yeah, I mean, everyone will recover from these things, so I don't think that was all that much of a sort of success story with enough time and distance from it. That said, just a few weeks ago, I was telling some now colleagues about how I still remember the C that I got, the first C that I got on an essay in college as a first year, which still bothers me to this day. But it also told me that field wasn't necessarily for me at the time. That's sort of very minor failure,
Sure.
and it's arguably not even a failure. I would say, to this day, being faculty now too, there are absolutely colleagues of mine and former professors who are way smarter than me and way better at computer science. And so even that I still find very intimidating. And I can think back to when I was in university and going to office hours, one-on-one appointments for help, and walking into the room with the professor, sitting side by side, and they might be the gentlest, nicest, smartest person. But for me, in my head at least, there was only so many minutes I should be in this room, even if there's no one else waiting. There's only so many questions I should really ask of Professor so-and-so. And so often I would emerge from these conversations feeling like an idiot. And I would often say oh yeah, I get it. And then I'm walking out the door no more informed than I was. And on the one hand, it was entirely my fault, because if I still didn't understand something, I should have said, Professor, I just don't get it. Can you explain it again? And we probably should have wrestled with it a bit more. So I would say it wasn't so much imposter syndrome, but just worrying that I'd look like an idiot too much.
And in get exactly what you mean.
Yeah, but in retrospect, it was so stupid and counterproductive, because walking out the door is not the solution to that problem. And here too, if we want to tie some threads together, what is so also, I think, incredible about tools like ChatGPT is that you can ask an infinite number of questions.
And no one's judging you.
It doesn't think you're an idiot. In fact, it's annoyingly optimistic and helpful. So that too is what we aspire for the CS50 Duck to be like. And I think that too has been a net positive when it comes to addressing some of these issues that clearly, if you're experiencing this occasionally, has not gone away after 30 some years in higher ed. So I think for me, maybe the first step is just talking about these things and admitting it and encouraging younger students, just this is why you're there. You're not an idiot. You just don't get something yet. And that's why you're there to learn. No,
that's really, really meaningful. Thank you. Okay, and I just want to end on a quick round of rapid fire questions, if that's okay. So yeah, feel free to dodge a question if you don't want to answer it, but it's just going to be quick questions if that's okay.
Okay.
So first question is iPhone versus Android.
iPhone.
Object.
Because, can I elaborate?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
The scrolling, every time, even all these years later after Android's evolution, I feel like the scrolling is not nearly as pixel perfect as it is on the iPhone. The hardware and software interaction is just better on an iPhone.
Okay.
But otherwise, they're functionally pretty much equivalent.
Got it. Object-oriented programming versus functional programming.
Oh, functional programming is more elegant, I think, but object-oriented stuff is what I would tend to reach for more.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Light mode versus dark mode on your favorite IDE.
I do system mode now, so I just let it choose based on time of day.
Sunset. Okay.
But for teaching purposes, we have gotten a lot of hate online when we have used light mode, especially when we've done big green screens behind me, because it just blows out people's eyes, especially when studying at night. So for teaching purposes now, we are all in on night mode.
Got it. Teaching in person versus teaching online, if you were just doing a Zoom lesson, for example.
I mean, in person, with the in-person audience and energy is much preferable to me. But I think experientially, I think that too is ideal for students, at least if you're doing it one or a few times. I think it's significantly diminishing returns if you're convening 3 times a week or even more than a small number of times during the semester.
Right.
I just think you get less and less value about convening everyone in the same place. And especially with fairly dense classes like CS50, which is also long in terms of its lectures, I think it's arguably, for most students, a better experience to watch it online because you can pause, rewind, fast forward, take breaks, all the super simple functionality that you get from the internet and video.
Got it.
You benefit from educationally. And sorry, my answers to your short questions are long.
No, that's okay. I think everyone's loving to listen to this. Just the last few questions. If you could have dinner with one person from the past or present, who would you choose and why?
It's been a while since I've had dinner with Brian Kernighan.
Okay.
That would be nice.
Brilliant. What is your favorite movie, if you have one?
Oh, Goonies growing up was my favorite movie, and I'll leave it at that to be short.
Sure. If you weren't a professor, what would you be?
I'd probably be working for some tech company,
Okay.
I'm guessing, at least after the path that I took in college.
To make sure you recharge after a long day of work, what's your favorite hobby outside the classroom?
Oh, I often fall asleep on the sofa watching TV these days, but travel is otherwise my preferred
Okay,
hobby.
so what's your favorite holiday destination?
Oh, it's not so much the holidays, it's sort of general travel, I would say. Okay. And I actually love, and I'm not just like pitching to the camera here, I love the UK.
Brilliant, okay. And you've inspired so many students yourself over the years, but if you had to choose maybe one lesson that someone's taught you that still sticks with you, would you be able to remember one of these lessons?
The first one that just came to mind was when I was taking CS51 with the professor who became my mentor, Henry Leitner. Mm-hmm. He did an example of what's generally called Monte Carlo simulation, and it's essentially a demonstration of randomness. And I'm surely forgetting some of the details, but the essence of what I remember is that he drew like a circle on the board, took a whole bunch of small pieces of chalk, threw them at the circle on the board to then do a calculation as to how many ended up in the circle and outside of the circle, which now that I think it through is surely has some dependencies on how and where you're throwing the chalk, but that was a very visual demonstration that stands out, and it's one of the memorable moments that I remember from university.
Got it. And if you had to start a startup tomorrow with unlimited funding and no constraints really, what would you choose and why? Obviously, it's a very tough question.
I'm not going to say AI like everyone else. No, it would be education focused, so as to make education broadly, if not freely available to all the more people. Okay,
and last two questions. Throughout your teaching, what's the most misunderstood topic in computer science?
Big O notation. It's an upper bound on running time. It's not necessarily worst case running time.
Okay.
And to be fair, we skate very close to this line in CS50 because we use Big O often in the context of worst case scenarios.
That's kind of what I remember from even studying at university.
But it's a subtlety that we try very careful to emphasize and re-emphasize, but those two are often conflated, understandably, but I do worry it does students a disservice later on in follow-on courses if they're not quite appreciating the nuances there.
Perfect. And before we wrap up, if you could just leave one message with the next generation of students, for anyone, anywhere, discovering computer science, or any field for that matter, just what would be your one kind of top tip?
At least programming will always take more time than you think. And this is true for me 30 years after first starting to do this. It still never ceases to amaze me how what's supposed to be a little project, a little bug fix, a little feature addition, just mushrooms because of something unexpected. And what pains me is when we see posts online on sites like Reddit and elsewhere where a student might ask, you know, if this is for them, if Mario took them 2 hours. That's it, like, or 4 hours even. Like, if you're hitting double digits, you're probably doing something wrong at that point and should be availing yourself of certain resources, reviewing material or whatnot. But if it's single-digit number of hours while trying to solve a CS50 problem, like, that is perfectly reasonable and should not at all be interpreted as discouragement.
Got it. No, that's really meaningful because I think, the biggest thing even for me is just giving up too quickly. And that what we were talking about earlier, that learning really comes from that last push or that last hour before you're going to get that solution.
And it will feel so good when the thing finally works. Even for me, all of these years later, when finally you squash some bug or finally you get some feature working just the way you want, it feels great.
Perfect. Well, Professor Malan, thank you so much for your time, not just for joining me today and giving me your time, but also for everything you've done to make computer science so accessible to literally, 6.3 million plus people all around the world. I think your relentless creativity, everything you just said about you're always trying to improve education for others, it's sparked a global movement. And even at Imperial, when I told some of my friends I'm coming here, everyone just goes, wow, when they hear your name. So I think that says something about how much you've inspired our whole generation. And just want to touch on what you said a bit earlier, that when you were a student and you'd sit with a professor and kind of be in awe about what to say, that's kind of the feeling I have right now, just being next to you. I think I really appreciate you taking like 45 minutes, 1 hour out of your busy evening to speak with me. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. And if we were just closing up a CS50 lecture right now, could you say your iconic catchphrase, please, for everyone?
All right. This was CS50.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Brilliant. That's it. Thanks. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm really glad this finally worked out.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It's fun thinking back on a lot of these things.
This is CS50, Harvard University's introduction to the intellectual enterprises of computer science and the art of programming.